invisible. In another place, in another time, she would have felt the majesty of the beauty around her. But as she stood on the beach, she realized that she didn't feel anything at all. In a way, she felt as if she weren't really here, and as if the whole thing was nothing but a dream. She'd driven here this morning, though she scarcely remembered the trip at all. When she'd made the decision to come, she'd planned to stay overnight. She'd made the arrangements and had even looked forward to a quiet night away from Boston. But watching the ocean swirl and churn made her realize that she didn't want to stay. She would drive home as soon as she was finished, no matter how late it was. When she finally was ready, Teresa slowly started to walk toward the water. Beneath her arm, she carried a bag that she had carefully packed that morning, making sure that she hadn't forgot anything. She hadn't told anyone what she was carrying with her, nor had she told them what she intended to do today. Instead, she'd said she was going Christmas shopping. It was the perfect excuse, and though she was sure that they would have understood had she told them the truth, this trip was something she didn't want to share with anyone. It had started with her alone, and that was the same way she wanted it to end. Teresa sighed and checked her watch. Soon it would be high tide, and it was then that she would finally be ready. After finding a spot on a small dune and looked comfortable, she sat in the sand and opened her bag. Searching through it, she found the envelope she wanted. Taking a deep breath, she slowly lifted the seal. In it were 3 letters, carefully folded, letters that she'd read more times than she could count. Holding them in front of her, she sat on the sand and stared at them. In the bag were other items as well, though she wasn't ready to look at those yet. Instead, she continued to focus on the letters. He'd used a fountain pen when he'd written them, and there were smudges in various places where the pen had leaked. The stationery with this picture of a sailing ship in the upper right-hand corner was beginning to discolor in places, fading slowly with the passage of time. She knew there would come a day when the words would be impossible to read, but hopefully after today she wouldn't feel the need to look at them so often. When she finished, she slipped them back into the envelope as carefully as she'd removed them. Then after putting the envelope back into the bag, she looked at the beach again. From where she was sitting, she could see the place where it had all started. She'd been jogging at daybreak, she remembered, and she could picture that summer morning clearly. It was the beginning of a beautiful day. As she took in the world around her, she listened to the high-pitched squawking of terns and the gentle lapping of the waves as they rolled up on the sand. Even though she was on vacation, she had risen early enough to run so that she didn't have to watch where she was going. the sidewalks back home. The sand seemed to give just enough, and she knew her knees wouldn't ache as they sometimes did after running on cemented pathways. She had always liked to jog, a habit she had picked up from running cross country and track in high school. Though she wasn't competitive anymore and seldom timed her runs, running was now one of the few times she could be alone with her thoughts. She considered it to be a kind of meditation, which was why she liked to do it alone. She never could understand why people like to run in groups. As much as she loved her son, she was glad Kevin wasn't with her. Every mother needs a break sometimes, and she was looking forward to taking it easy while she was here. No evening soccer games or swim meets. No MTV blaring in the background. No homework to help with. No waking up in the middle of the night to comfort him when he got leg cramps. She had taken him to the airport 3 days ago to catch a plane to visit his father, her ex, in California, and was only after reminding him that Kevin realized he hadn't hugged or kissed her goodbye yet. "Sorry, Mom," he said as he wrapped his arms around her and kissed her. "Love you. Don't miss me too much, okay?" Then turning around, he handed the ticket to the flight attendant and almost skipped onto the plane without looking back. She didn't blame him for almost forgetting. At 12, he was in the awkward phase when he thought that hugging and kissing his mom in public wasn't cool. Besides, his mind was on other things. He had been looking forward to this trip since Christmas. He and his father were going to the Grand Canyon, then would spend a week rafting down the Colorado River, and finally go on to Disneyland. It was every kid's fantasy trip, and she was happy for him. Although he would be gone for 6 weeks, she knew it was good for Kevin to spend time with his father. She and David had been on relatively good terms since they divorced 3 years ago. Although he wasn't the greatest husband, he was a good father to Kevin. He never missed sending a birthday or Christmas gift, called weekly, and traveled across the country a few times a year just to spend weekends with his son. Then, of course, there were the court-mandated visits as well. 6 weeks in the summer, every other Christmas, and Easter break when school let out for a week. Annette, David's new wife, had her hands full with the baby, but Kevin liked her a lot, and he had never returned home feeling angry or neglected. In fact, he usually raved about his visits and how much fun he had. There were times when she felt a twinge of jealousy at that, but she did her best to hide it from Kevin. Now on the beach, she ran at a moderate clip. Deanna would be waiting for her to finish her run before she started breakfast. Brian would already be gone, she knew, and Teresa looked forward to visiting with her. They were an older couple. Both of them were nearing 60 now, but Deanna was the best friend she had. The managing editor at the newspaper where Teresa worked, Deanna, had been coming to the Cape with her husband Brian for years. They always stayed in the same place, the Fisher House. And when she found out that Kevin was leaving to visit his father in California for a good portion of the summer, she insisted that Teresa come along. Brian golfs every she said. And besides, what else are you going to do? You've got to get out of that apartment sometime. Teresa knew she was right, and after a few days of thinking it over, she finally agreed. I'm so glad, Deanna had said, with a victorious look on her face. You're going to love it there. Teresa had to admit it was a nice place to stay. The Fisher house was a beautifully restored captain's house that sat in the edge of a rocky cliff overlooking Cape Cod Bay. And when she saw it in the distance, she slowed to a jog. Unlike the younger runners who sped up toward the end of their runs, she preferred to slow down and take it easy. At 36, she didn't recover as fast as she once had. As her breathing eased, she thought about how she would spend the rest of her day. She had brought 5 books with her for the vacation. Books she had been wanting to read for the last year, but had never gotten around to it. There just didn't seem to be enough time anymore, not with Kevin and his never-ending energy, keeping up with the housework, definitely not with all the work constantly piled to her desk. As a syndicated columnist for the Possum Times, she was under constant deadline pressure to put out 3 columns a week. Most of her co-workers thought she had it made. Just type up 300 words and be done for the day. But it wasn't like that at all. To consistently come up with something original regarding parenting wasn't easy anymore, especially if she wanted to syndicate further. Although her column, Modern Parenting, went out in 60 newspapers across the country, though most ran only 1 or 2 of her columns in a given week, and because the syndication offers had started only 18 months ago, and she was a newcomer to most papers, she couldn't afford even a few off days. Column space in most newspapers was extremely limited, and hundreds of columnists were vying for those few spots. Teresa slowed to a walk, and finally, as a Caspian turn circled overhead, the humidity was up and she used her forearm to wipe the perspiration from her face. She took a deep breath, held it for a moment, then exhaled after looking out over the water. Because it was early, the ocean was still murky gray, but that would change once the sun rose a little higher. It looked enticing. After a moment, she took off her shoes and socks and walked on the water's edge to let the tiny waves lap over her feet. The water was refreshing, and she spent a few minutes wading back and forth. She was suddenly glad she had taken the time to write extra columns over the last few months so that she would be able to forget work this week. She could remember the last time she didn't have a computer nearby or a meeting to attend or a deadline to meet, and it felt liberating to be away from her desk for a while. It almost felt as if she were in control of her own destiny again, as if she were just starting out in the world. True, there are dozens of things she knew she could do, be doing at home, the bathroom, should have been wallpapered and updated by now. The nail holes in her walls needed to be spackled, and the rest of the apartment could use some touching up paint as well. A couple of months ago, she had bought the wallpaper and some paint, towel rods, and door handles, and a new vanity mirror, as well as all the tools she needed to take care of it. But she hadn't even opened the boxes yet. It was always something to do next weekend, though the weekends were often just as busy as her work days. The items she bought still sat in the bag she bought them in, behind the vacuum. Every time she opened the closet door, she seemed to mock her good intentions. Maybe she thought to herself when she returned home. She turned her head and saw a man standing a little way down the beach. He was older than she, maybe 50 or so, and his face was deeply tan as if he lived here year-round. He didn't appear to be moving. He simply stood in the water and let it wash over his legs, and she noticed his eyes were closed as if he were enjoying the beauty of the world without having to watch it. He was wearing faded jeans rolled up to his knees and a comfortable shirt he hadn't bothered to tuck in. As she watched him, she suddenly wished she were in a different kind of person. What would it be like to walk the beaches without another care in the world? How would it be to come to a quiet spot every day away from the hustle and bustle of Boston just to appreciate what life had to offer? She stepped out a little further into the water and mimicked the man, hoping to feel whatever it was he was feeling. But when she closed her eyes, the only thing she could think about was Kevin. Lord knew she wanted to spend more time with him, and she definitely wanted to be more patient with him when they were together. She wanted to be able to sit and talk with Kevin, or play Monopoly with him, or simply watch TV with him without feeling the urge to get up from the couch to do something more important. There were times when she felt like a fraud when insisting to Kevin that he came first and that family was the most important thing he'd have. But the problem was that there was always something to do. Dishes to be washed, bathrooms to be cleaned, the cat box to be empty. Cars needed tune-ups, laundry needed to be done, and bills had to be paid. Even though Kevin helped a lot with his chores, he was almost as busy as she was with school and friends and all his other activities. As it was, magazines went out straight to the garbage unread. Letters went unwritten, and sometimes in moments like these, she worried that her life was slipping past her. But how to change all that? Take life one day at a time, her mother always said. But her mother didn't have to work outside the home or raise a strong and confident yet caring son without benefit of a father. She didn't understand the pressures that Teresa faced on a daily basis. Neither did her sister, her younger sister Janet, who had followed the footsteps of her mother. She and her husband had been happily married for almost 11 years and 3 wonderful girls to show for it. Edward wasn't a brilliant man, but he was honest, worked hard, and provided for his family well enough that Janet didn't have to work. There were times when Teresa thought she might like a life like that, even if it meant giving up her career. But that wasn't possible since David and she divorced. 3 years now, 4 if you continue the year they were separated. She didn't hate David for what he had done, but her respect for him had been shattered. Adultery, whether a one-night stand or a long affair, wasn't something she could live with, nor did it make her feel better that he never married the woman he'd been carrying on with for 2 years. The breach of trust was irreparable. David moved back to his home state of California a year after they separated and met Annette a few months later. His new wife was very religious, and little by little she got David interested in the church. David, a lifelong agnotist, had always seemed to be hungry for something more meaningful in his life. Now he attended church regularly and actually served as a marriage counselor along with the pastor. What could he possibly say to someone doing the same things he'd done? She often wondered, and how could he help others if he hadn't been able to control himself? She didn't know, didn't care. still took an interest in his son. Naturally, once she and David had split up, a lot of her friendships ended as well. Now that she was no longer part of a couple, she seemed to be out of place at friends' Christmas parties or backyard barbecues. A few friends remained, though, and she heard from them on her answering machine, suggesting that they set up a lunch date or come over for dinner. Occasionally she would go, but usually she made excuses not to. To her, none of those friendships seemed the way they used to. But then, of course, they weren't. Things changed, people changed, and the world went rolling along right outside the window. Since the divorce, there had been only a handful of dates. It wasn't that she was unattractive. She was, or she was often told. Her hair was dark brown, just above her shoulders, and straight as spider silk. Her eyes, the feature she was most often complimented on, were brown with flecks of hazel that caught the light when she was outside. Since she ran daily, she was fit and didn't look as old as she was. She didn't feel old either, but when she looked in the mirror lately, she seemed to see her age catching up with her. A new wrinkle around the corner of her eye, a gray hair that seemed to have grown overnight, a vaguely weary look from being constantly on the run. Her friends thought she was crazy. You look better now than you did years ago, they insisted, and she still noticed a few men eyeing her across the aisle in the supermarket. But she wasn't, nor ever would be, 22 again. Not that she would want to be, even if she could, unless she sometimes thought to herself she could take her more mature brain back with her. If she didn't, she'd probably get caught up with another David, a handsome man who craved the good things in life with the underlying assumption that he didn't have to play by the rules. But damn it, rules were important, especially the ones regarding marriage. They were the ones a person was never supposed to break. Her father and mother didn't break them. Her sister and brother-in-law didn't. Nor did Deanna and Brian. Why did he have to? And why, she wondered as she stood in the surf, did her thoughts always come back to this, even after all this time? She supposed that it had something to do with the fact that when the divorce papers finally arrived, she felt as if a little part of her had died. That initial anger she felt had turned to sadness, and now it had become something else, almost a dullness of sorts. Even though she was constantly in motion, it seemed as if nothing special ever happened to her anymore. Each day seemed exactly like the last, and she had trouble differentiating among them. One time, about a year ago, she sat at her desk for 15 minutes, trying to remember the last spontaneous thing she'd done. She couldn't think of it. The first few months had been hard on her. By then, the anger had subsided, and she didn't feel the urge to lash out at David and make him pay for what he had done. All she could do was feel sorry for herself. Even having Kevin around all the time did nothing to change the fact that she felt absolutely alone in the world. There was a short time when she couldn't sleep for more than a few hours a night, and now and then she was at work. She would leave her desk and go sit in her car to cry for a while. Now, with 3 years gone by the honesty, she honestly didn't know if she would ever love someone again the way she had loved David. When David showed up at her sorority party at the beginning of her junior year, one look was all it took for her to know she wanted to be with him. Her young love had seemed to so stay awake thinking about him as she lay in her bed and she walked across campus. She smiled so often that other people would smile back whenever she saw them. But love like that doesn't last. At least that's what she found out. Over the years, a different kind of marriage emerged. She and David grew up and apart. It became hard to remember the things that had first drawn them to each other. Looking back, Teresa felt that David became a different person altogether, although she couldn't pinpoint the moment when it all began to change. But anything can happen when the flame of a relationship goes out, and for him it did. A chance meeting at a video store, a conversation that led to lunch and eventually to hotels throughout the greater Boston area. The unfair thing about the whole situation was that she still missed him sometimes, or rather, the good parts about him. Being married to David was comfortable, like a bed she'd slept in for years. She had been broken. She had been used to having another person around just to talk to or listen. She had gotten used to waking up to the smell of brewing coffee in the morning, and she missed having another adult presence in the apartment. She missed a lot of things, but most of all, she missed the intimacy that came from holding and whispering to one another behind closed doors. Kevin wasn't old enough to understand this yet, and though she loved him deeply, it wasn't the same kind of love she wanted right now. Her feeling for Kevin was a mother's love, probably the deepest, most holy love there is. Even now, she liked to go to his room after he was asleep and sit on his bed just to look at him. Kevin always looked so peaceful, so beautiful, with his head on the pillow and the covers piled around him. In the daytime, he seemed to be constantly on the go, but at night, his still sleeping figure always brought back the feeling she had when she was still a baby. Yet, even though wonderful feelings didn't change the fact that once she left his room, she would go downstairs to have a glass of wine with only Harvey the cat to keep her company. She still dreamed about falling in love with someone, of having someone take her in his arms and make her feel she was the only one who mattered. But it was hard, if not impossible, to meet someone decent these days. Most of the men she knew in their 30s were already married, and the ones that were divorced seemed to be looking for someone younger whom they could somehow mold into exactly what they wanted. That left older men, and even though she thought she could fall in love with someone older, she had her son to worry about. She wanted a man who would treat Kevin the way he should be treated, not simply as the unwanted byproduct of someone he desired. But the reality was that older men usually had older children. Few welcomed the trials of raising an adolescent male in the 90s. I've already done my job. A date had once informed her curtly that had been the end of that relationship. She admitted that she also missed the physical intimacy that came from loving and trusting and holding someone else. She had been with a man since she and David divorced. She has not been with a man. There had been opportunities, of course. Finding someone to sleep with was never difficult for an attractive woman. But that simply wasn't her vacationing at Cape Cod alone in the world and without a man anywhere in the foreseeable future. She wanted to do some things this week just for herself. Read some books, put her feet up, and have a glass of wine without the TV flickering in the background. Write some letters to friends she hadn't heard from in a while. Sleep late, eat too much, and jog in the mornings before everyone got there to spoil it. She wanted to experience freedom again, if only for a short time. She also wanted to shop this week, not at JCPenney or Sears or places that advertise Nike shoes and Chicago Bulls t-shirts, but at little trinket stores that Kevin found boring. She wanted to try on some new dresses and buy a couple that flattered her figure, just to make her feel she was still alive and vibrant. Maybe she would even get her hair done. She hadn't had a new style in years, and she was tired of looking the same every day. And a nice guy happened to ask her out this week, and maybe she'd go, just to have her an excuse to wear the new things she bought. With a somewhat renewed sense of optimism, she looked to see if the man with the rolled-up jeans was still there, but he had gone as quietly as he had come, and she was ready to go as well. Her legs had stiffened in the cool water, and sitting down to put on her shoes was a little more difficult than she expected. Since she didn't have a towel, she hesitated for a moment before putting on her socks and decided she didn't have to. She was on vacation at the beach. No need for shoes or socks. She carried them with her as she started toward the house. She walked close to the water's edge and saw a large rock half buried in the sand, a few inches from a spot where the early morning tide had reached its highest point. Strange, she thought to herself. It seemed out of place here. As she approached, she noticed something different about the way it looked. It was smooth and long, for one thing, and she drew nearer. She realized it wasn't a rock at all. It was a bottle, probably discarded by a careless tourist or one of the local teens who liked to come here at night. She looked over her shoulder and saw a garbage can chained to the lifeguard tower and decided to do her good deed for the day. When she reached it, however, she was surprised to see that it was corked. She picked it up, holding it into better light, and saw a note inside wrapped with yarn standing on its end. For a second, she felt her heart quicken as another memory came back to her. When she was 8 years old and vacationing in Florida with her parents, she and another girl had once sent a letter via the sea, but she never received a reply. The letter was simple, a child's letter, but when she returned home, she remembered raising the mailbox for weeks afterward, hoping that someone had found it and sent a letter to her from where the bottle washed up. When nothing ever came, disappointment set in, the memory fading gradually until it became nothing at all. But now it all came back to her. Who had been with her that day? A girl about her age, Tracy. No, Stacy. Yes, Stacy. Stacy was her name. She had blonde hair. She was staying with her grandparents for the summer, and surprised when the note dropped to the sand by her feet almost immediately. When she leaned over to pick it up, she noticed it was tightly bound, which was why it slid out so easily. She untied the yarn carefully, and the first thing that struck her as she unrolled the message was the paper. This was no child's stationery. It was expensive paper, thick and sturdy, with the silhouette of a sailing ship embossed in the upper right-hand corner, and the paper itself was crinkled, aged-looking, almost as if it had been in the water for hundreds of years. She caught herself holding her breath. Maybe it was old. It could be. There were stories about bottles washing up after 100 years at sea, and that could be the case now. Maybe she had a real artifact here. But as she scrutinized the writings itself, she saw that she was mistaken. This was a date. There was a date in the upper left-hand corner of the paper. July 22nd, 1997. A little more than 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks? That's all. She took a little further. She looked a little further. The message was long. It covered the front and back sides of the paper, and it didn't seem to request any reply of sorts. A quick glance showed no address or phone number anywhere, but she supposed it could have been written into the letter itself. She felt a twinge of curiosity as she held the message in front of her, and it was then, in the rising sunlight of a hot New England day, that she first read the letter that would change her life forever. And the letter reads, July 22nd, 1997. My dearest Kathleen, I miss you, my darling, as I always do, but today is especially hard because the ocean has been singing to me, and the song is that of our life together. I can almost feel you beside me as I write this letter, and I can smell the scent of wild flowers that always reminds me of you. But at this moment, these things give me no pleasure. Your visits have been coming less often, and I feel sometimes as if the greatest part of who I am is slowly slipping away. I am trying, though. At night, when I am alone, I call for you, and whenever my aches seem to be the greatest, you still seem to find a way to return to me. But soon, always too soon, your image vanishes and the fog rolls back to its